Welcome to another episode of the Apex Perspective podcast. Today, I get the pleasure to sit down with Sunny Ghosh, who is a serial entrepreneur. Now, Sunny has started off as a guitarist in a very non-traditional way. He started off as a guitarist. He led to becoming a professional, where he added lots of value to companies, and subsequently, he became a serial entrepreneur. But Sunny, can you tell me more from your perspective, more about your background, and really how it led you to embark on this really unique route?
Sure. Thank you, Aryan, for having me over. Um, I think, in a sense, I've been, a very creative person right from the beginning, and then, eventually, with exposure, with time and exposure across countries and across domains and across people and across societies and by and large, I've actually understood what is called commercialization. So it
Mhm.
was not just ideas that came and sort of hand on to me. It was the ability in my career to commercialize these ideas, so to say, bring innovation onto the market. And I've paid the cost of innovation as such. I've been an
Mhm.
early mover in most of the industries, most of the domains that I've actually gone inside, and then eventually seen some revenue traction, investor connects, and all of that stuff. So it's been a mix of multiple things. Um, but if you really want to nail me down and say what is it that you really belong to, where do you really belong to, I'm actually a go-to-market guy. All
Mhm.
I've done my entire life is to take ideas into the market, commercialize them, sell
Mhm.
them, bring it to the hands of customers, investors, and help scale companies. And that is what I've done for most of 30 odd years that I've actually worked.
Excellent. Well, we're going to get to that and the amazing work you've done, which I've seen. But to start off, I'd love to go over how you started as a guitarist and then chose to pursue a more professional route specifically after that.
I'm born in India,
Hmm.
and obviously the era that I was I'm part of actually. There was lots of good music, lots of exposure to Western music, not only Western classical, but also Western, the different genres of Western music and so on. And so
Hmm.
I was being trained right when I was a kid to play the violin and the guitar.
Hmm.
And both that training actually helped me a lot because um, helped me get a discipline in life, helped me understand the nature in which we all operate, how sound travels, how physics works by and large. And so that kind of gave me the understanding very soon in life that that commercialization
Hmm.
is a very essential component of being in this ecosystem.
Hmm.
And by
Hmm.
commercialization, it could mean getting an audience, it could
Hmm.
mean getting your idea into the hands of people, and so on and
Hmm.
so forth. And I was going through multiple, sort of trajectories because when I was actually stepping out of my high school, I was actually seeing paging coming inside the country. I was actually seeing trunking coming inside the country. I was
Hmm.
actually seeing the first time the mobile phone in the hands of people, right?
Hmm.
And internet came around that same time as well. So it was a series of trajectories, innovation, digital innovations that got me going very fast with possibilities that could be unraveled, that could be explored. Um and so there, lies the basic, sort of ingredients
Hmm.
for my transition from being a musician to becoming a professional, and
Hmm.
then the whole rise of content, right? I
Right.
mean, think about it, right? There was nothing beyond a newspaper by and large for the entire world. And then internet came in, and then the whole content actually boomed, right, all over the place. And
Hmm.
not just on internet websites like the CNNs or the BBCs, but it actually went in personal, in the hands of people. And
Hmm.
so the rise of content, the rights of communities, the rights of commerce, the rise of cooperation, the rise of capacity, all of these things, the different seeds of the world actually helped me to actually craft and transition myself to being a professional.
Hmm.
And then I've always been a sales guy, in by and large, my nature wise. I've been a sales guy
Excellent.
because not from being selling something, but just by listening, understanding, being empathetic about it has been my foray right from the beginning. So
Hmm.
that actually helped me a lot in my professional career. So I actually started as a musician, then became, because of my education background, I have a mathematics honors. I went into the tech side. Um, Writing code became a way of life for a couple of years. Then went
Hmm.
into consulting side, analysis, business analysis side. Then I said, hey, this is all boring stuff. Let's meet customers. Let's spend time with the customers. And that's when I actually kind of, unfolded myself to be a sales guy. So since then, I've actually been a GTM and sales guy. And
Hmm.
coincidences, unlike India, where 99% of people have been from the IT services side, I have never
Hmm.
worked for an IT services company. Okay. The
Wow.
only thing I've worked is just product, 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 product. Indian products, global products, and so on and so forth. I worked in particularly, I worked with roughly about 17 odd product companies in my career. So
Wow.
that's really, yeah, that's really where I come from. And then
Right.
once you get into a domain, once you get into the ecosystem, once you get into a domain, one thing leads to another thing. And if you see the last 10 years that has happened, 10 to 15, 12, 15 years, we've actually gone through from centralization to entire
Hmm.
decentralization mode. So
Hmm.
with this decentralization mode, the world has opened up, spun out opportunities everywhere in the space of data, in the space of cloud, in the space of automation, in the space of workflows. So it's basically that entire area is where I have actually played a kind of a role there.
Excellent. And before we get into your go-to-market strategy, which a lot of which you specialize in and which you've done which you have a strong record in, I'd love to make commentary on how you quickly understood commercializing is a really key component to any kind of process when it comes to any skills that you want to maximize. For example, I was speaking to a lot of doctors recently, and we were looking into the urgent care industry, which by itself doubled in the last decade alone. Now, a lot of underserved areas were not receiving its need, obviously, in around 2008, 2009, and it's because no one understood the business component about how to make urgent care specifically profitable. Once there was a better development of understanding how to commercialize and gain profit out of urgent care centers, all the underserved areas of the United States became far more attended to once urgent care expansion and profitability became a central focus. So a decade later, after 2008, it's now averaging around $500,000 in profit, which is now why you can serve people better in the medical industry. So I think commercializing and understanding the business side of things is always very, very important. So I just want to make that one
Yep.
commentary about what you said earlier, and I really appreciate that perspective. Now, to fast forward and really understand your first, I would say, your first steps into really the product side, I would also like to ask you, when you started off a bit more technical doing coding, do you think that gave you a different perspective when it came to later in your career when you got into the product side of things? Do you think it gave you a better understanding of how to perhaps go forward with products?
It did. It certainly
Mhm.
did because um, you see, when you write code and when you write a piece of letter, there is not much different. There, the platform is a piece of paper, and when you write code, there's a dot file somewhere that you're
Mhm.
using. So it's fundamentally that, but the ability to understand um, and automate, um, it fundamentally gives you a very clear understanding of how you can bridge
Mhm.
the gap between the physical
Yes.
world and the virtual world, right?
Mhm.
Without actually knowing to write code, it would have been very difficult for me to actually interpret software in the way I interpret software, right?
Mhm.
And also, one more thing is that if I would have been an engineer by and large for a very long time, I would find it very difficult to interpret a customer need or a want or an ask very differently. So I had to, by and large, because of my music background, my my uh, creative side, the ability to understand code, the ability to understand customers,
Hmm.
empathy, all that put together, I could understand that, hey, hold on for a second. We're not selling software here. We're selling a solution. We're selling a
Right,
job,
right.
right? And what is
Yes,
it that the job needs to do? Let's focus on that piece of it instead of actually focusing on creating bells and whistles and UI, UX, and all of that stuff, which are
right.
always required. That's all great stuff. But fundamentally, there is a need, an unmet need somewhere that needs to be taken
Exactly.
care of,
So you
right?
understood these gaps properly, and then you utilize that technical expertise to attend to those gaps. But for you to add actual real value, you'd have to understand the business side of things, which is understanding the gap in a particular market. So I really like that
Absolutely.
perspective. I love that perspective. Now, when it comes to sales, I know you said you've always been a sales guy. I was really interested in understanding when you start being, I guess, acquainted with sales, and what is your thesis on approaching sales? Because I know you do this for the enterprise level. You don't do it specifically for business to consumer products.
Yeah. I have actually been, you see, impact, understanding impact is something that I have practiced long before anybody else have been thinking about it or
Hmm.
even came into the business books. Um, what do you do needs to make an impact, and that actually gets connected to the global impact and so on and so forth. Everything in
Hmm.
this world is connected. And so, in a way, when you build a software or you build any services company or any business that out there survives, it survives because it creates an impact somewhere.
Right.
It could be a hyperlocal business, it could be an e-commerce, it could be a tech business, it could be a services business. It creates an impact. Understanding that impact and how that maps into your customer's business, your
Hmm.
larger world impact. These things really matter a lot, and I understood that very early on.
Hmm.
With that, it actually helped me um, to a very large extent to understand what to build, what to market, and what not to do.
Hmm.
I have actually learned to say no a lot faster in my life than to say yes. And the no's have actually helped me to steer companies and products in very specific pockets, very specific use cases that makes a difference.
Love it. Yes. So for you to be able to do that successfully, you also had to understand the market as well. What's very interesting about your track record is you've understood how to put products into the global market specifically. So what are the steps from your perspective to evaluate markets, especially if they're not ones you're fully acquainted with, or the ones where you live in essentially? How do you understand those markets properly, and what kind of gaps are to create the best use cases?
Okay, so I've used a bunch of tools, but that came a lot later. Tools and
Hmm.
technologies evolved over the last, I would say, over the last 10, 12 years. But by and large, prior to the whole, proliferation of tools and technologies, the fundamental stuff that I've actually used is a Patricia Moore model of
Hmm.
actually slip, kind of slipping into the dress of the actual user
Hmm.
and going and understanding what that user is feeling, going through impact wise, physically, emotionally, and so on and so forth. So I will use that as a model, and in parallel to that, I've used a market commercial model, which is a very
Hmm.
standard Clayton model where you constantly question the market,
Hmm.
where you actually sort of look at why do people do certain things and make an impact, you know.
Hmm.
So it's a combination of things, but it's like I said earlier, it's all connected to each other. So
Hmm.
if you look at it from a product standpoint, a product does not exist in isolation. It's generally an increment to an existing product, or it's a decrement from another product, but it
Hmm.
actually exists in correlation. Sometimes the product is a
Right.
bigger journey, sometimes the product is just a transient piece that helps you to bridge between one thing to the other. I'll give you an example, right? So in 2000, uh, 2007, I was running this company called Wolf Frameworks Platform as a Service, and
Hmm.
that was a way ahead of time, a low code, no code online database, rapid application platform on the cloud for building RAD applications or business applications. That company saw customer traction. We didn't raise any funding. We were customer funded, but then we had a fundamental problem. Nobody would use our tools and technology, which, well, now it's Microsoft Power Builder and other stuff, which looks identical to what Wolf looked like. But those days, nobody
Hmm.
used us as a user configurable platform. They used our services to get
Hmm.
their applications up and running.
Hmm.
Now, we said, hey, that's not what we set out to do. We set out to build annuity product income. So we pivoted the company. We pivoted the company into a company called CollateBox, which was pitched
Hmm.
against Google Spreadsheets and Box.com. And what we were doing with CollateBox is was an Excel-like interface. Okay. It was
Hmm.
launched at demo.com, Santa Clara, one of the best places to launch a product those days. And we actually had hundreds of users and thousands of users actually clocking the CollateBox platform. And they were
Hmm.
using the platform for primarily building all sorts of Excel-like applications. But the only use case they were using it is they were hiding the data. When you use Google Spreadsheet, your data is exposed immediately to who you share that
Okay.
view with. And in Box, you could share views of the data. So,
Hmm.
for example, one second,
No problem.
you could share column A, B, C to Aryan and
Hmm.
D, E, F to Josh or
Hmm.
an X, Y, Z to somebody else. They
Hmm.
would only work with their columns of data and it'll get auto collated. That's why the name collate box. Now, so people were using it for yacht club, people were using it for gambling, people were using it for their bank savings data, all that kind of stuff. And we existed in the market. We carved out a niche for ourselves from Google Spreadsheet, from the Excels of the world, from the
Wow.
box.com, and we existed in the market. So going back to that point, you know, understanding this journey, it's not done in pen and paper. You got to start the process and then you reiterate, iterate, iterate. But the only way you do it is you have to make your users successful. If you have
Right.
usage on the table, then you've got a great product. If you do not
Hmm.
have usage on the table, it's just money wasted.
And in addition to what you're saying, how do you determine what is truly valuable to the user? Because there can be there's an ongoing idea behind what the user says they want and then what they actually might need. How do you distinguish that and figure out what's truly valuable to the user?
Okay, so the basic parameters remain the same, which is the amount of time spent, the amount of
Hmm.
logins, blah, blah, blah. So I'm not getting into that part of it. That's
Okay.
just, business as usual. But one of the most important parameters is in this how to determine what is it that is a painkiller versus what is it that is a vitamin.
Okay.
One of the important criteria in this is how much is it spreading as well. So, for example, not just the time that I'm spending, but the amount of spread that it is able to do by itself in terms of
Hmm.
shares, in terms of likes, in terms of so on and so forth. That is a very crucial matrix that a lot of companies kind of ignore. Share by
Hmm.
itself is a business model,
Hmm. Right.
right?
So yes, yes. And what I was really interested in seeing, and I was checking through, was really approaching the global market is one of the things that I saw that was very interesting about what you've done. So you've done this for multiple companies. How do you determine if a product will actually succeed in the global market? And how do you position it properly?
Okay. So the way the it works in my context is I look at a use case. I don't even look at a product. I just
Hmm.
ask and find out what is the use case for which this product or solution is being built. So
Okay.
let's assume that use case is XYZ. Okay. And that XYZ needs to have a resonance in the market that you're going after. So, from a broad scale perspective, from an MBA school perspective, you would typically look at the TAM, the SAM, the SOM, blah, blah, blah. That's all great stuff. You
Right.
look at the peripheral products, you look at the core products that you're going to replace, your competition, and you say that the market is so big and so on and so forth. Good a base to start with. But when you take that use case, you just very clearly determine or plan how much time do I want to sit with this use case in that market. Do I
Mm.
have the
Okay.
bandwidth? Do I have the budget to actually sit with the use case? When Google makes a product, the use case bandwidth is 8 to 12 years. When
Hmm.
Microsoft makes it makes it for that 10-year gap. As a startup, do you have the bandwidth to sit, go to a market, sit with the use case, the leanest, meanest way possible with your partnerships, with your innovation model for at least 3 to 5 years? If you can, then you have the possibility to iterate and survive and build something that makes sense for that market. And if the market is big enough, then that will percolate by itself. The other fundamental thing you got to remember is you got to build for jobs that never going to change, not
Mm.
the top of the
Mm.
line stuff. Sales fundamentally will never change. Marketing will never change. Finance will never change. Fundraising will never change,
Mhm.
right? Um,
Right.
if you build products for these kind of fundamental jobs, you're essentially building something that is long term and sustainable.
Right. Right. I love that perspective. That's a sustainable perspective as well, which I can really appreciate. Now, when it comes to entrepreneurship, I was really curious when you decide to become an entrepreneur and why did you start to choose that route?
I actually did not plan to become an entrepreneur at all. I
Okay.
went ahead and worked for some very interesting product companies. Particularly, there was a company that I worked for called Digimaker. There's a company that I worked for called Episerver, um,
Hmm.
and then so on and so forth. Prior to that was Skelta Workflow. Very interesting product companies. Um, but what actually happened with me is every time I went up the ladder, and I'm not the only one. Most people go through this. When
Right.
you go up the ladder in a company, when you hit the C-suite category,
Hmm.
um, at some point you have to take your calls, and these are
Hmm.
leap of faith, these are guts,
Hmm.
these are essentially where you say that nope, no is a no or yes is a yes, and let's go this way versus that way. So you get into different folks and you have to take calls. If when
Hmm.
you are not an entrepreneur, when you don't have that company in your own grip, if you not build a company with your own blood and sweat, you will obviously be overruled by somebody else's
Right.
determination.
Right.
And
Right.
that did not go very well with me because I
Hmm.
could not steer the company in the direction that I
Right.
wanted to. And so
Right.
what happens is if you're a customer guy in the company, like a chief customer officer for the company, you are going to lose some relationships of
Hmm.
customers because
Hmm.
you couldn't steer the company in a certain direction. And I was losing
Right.
relationships.
Right. Right.
So I
Okay.
decided that enough is enough. Next time I build a product and take it out to the market, it will be my blood and sweat and money.
Yeah.
And that's how I
Okay.
became an entrepreneur.
Wow. I mean, and that's a very it's not uncommon. It's a not an uncommon way to become an entrepreneur. So
Yeah.
you started one of the things that one of the companies I saw you started was Collate Box, which was later acquired, of course, by AceBot AI. Can you tell me
Yeah.
more about the founding story behind that company, the specific gap you identified, and how you validated your idea?
Yeah, it was actually a pivot from Wolf Frameworks platform as a
Okay.
service, and
Okay.
the pivot was primarily because people didn't want to use a RAD application or a business application framework to develop applications. So
Hmm.
we started thinking and questioning. So what are applications? If you decode it at the bottom, applications are nothing but views of data, right?
Hmm.
An ERP, what is it? It's a view of a data. A CRM, what is it? It's a view of a data,
Hmm.
right? So Excel's have been there doing business applications for us for 30, 40 years now, right? 30 years
Yeah.
plus. So we said, oh, hold on. So why not actually just give them the Excel and tell them manipulate the data? We'll create the views automatically, and you can call it an ERP, a CRM, and blah blah blah. So
Mm,
the user uptake was a lot faster. So
got
that
it.
learning actually came because we ran Wolf for 3 to 4 years.
Hmm.
That learning came up. And obviously the proliferation of the cloud came up because when we started Wolf, we only had Rackspace, and I forget the other one, another company that was offering cloud. There
Hmm.
was no Azure, there was no Google, there was no AWS or any such thing. They came a lot later. So we were like the first, companies out there, like Coghead, Salesforce, Wool Frameworks, Zoho Creator, Intuit QuickBase. These were the cloud companies. These were the companies that build the cloud. And so, just to go back to your question, how we determined it is because
Hmm.
going back to the same thing, how long did you stay in the market with the use case? And
Right.
iterated, learned, and then realize what does the user really want. Nobody
Hmm.
wants to go through change. Nobody wants to go through switching cost, right?
Yes.
Change management
And
is the biggest problem.
and that's why I was going to ask you, how do you know when to pivot?
It's a good question. It's a very tough question, actually.
Hmm.
It is a very business determined situation
Hmm.
in terms of when to pivot, because you could be pivoting for revenue reasons, you could be pivoting because of a bigger market
Hmm.
opportunity, you could be
Hmm.
pivoting for fundraising, you could be voting for a better experiment. But I think the fundamental question that pivot should pivot should help you is the act of developing a product company, or for that matter a solution company, is
Hmm.
an act of experiments.
Hmm.
This is the fundamental model behind any good successful product company out there.
Hmm.
Even Microsoft today is not stable. Leave OpenAI, Claude, and Perplexity and all of these boys out of this discussion. They're definitely
Hmm.
not stable, right?
Hmm.
Even Google is constantly experimenting and deleting their own product set, building something else, and so on and so forth. So pivot is a state of experiment. How big is the experiment? What is the gain out of the experiment is determines whether you should pivot or you should stay back and wait.
Hmm. Love that. Now, one last question, as I know we're going over these important details, is how do you approach hiring?
How do you approach hiring?
Yeah, hiring the correct people. As I'm sure you scale the
Oh,
company, I'm
yeah.
sure you led at the executive level. How do you approach hiring?
Yeah, find people who are very passionate. Early stage, that's all that matters. Find people
Mhm.
who is going to be very passionate, not very expensive, obviously, ready to invest in the company, ready to invest in your vision, brings along a vision of their own. They can steer their question, they can question you. That ability to question you is very important. Those are the kind of
Mhm.
people I would love to hire. I love to hire.
Excellent. And I love those perspectives you shared today. They're all extremely important. And I think that really understanding these use cases, understanding how long you want to be in the market, and really understanding the customer's needs are imperative to really seeing success here. So I really appreciate this perspective you provided today.
Mhm.
What I'd like you to do now is go ahead and shift this conversation to a little bit more about you on the personal side. And the first question I have for you is, what is something about you or your life that you wish more people knew about?
Just repeat that last line. I couldn't get it.
Of course. What is something about you or your life that you wish more people knew about?
I'm a fun-loving guy.
Yeah, awesome. So, how do you spend your
Yeah,
time on the weekends then?
it's just a game of golf, some good food. I'm a cook myself. I
Hmm.
still pick up the guitar once in a blue moon and play something. There is another initiative of mine called BREWRA Live, which is a music tech company which organizes concerts, intimate, cozy, homely environment concerts with established and emerging artists. across genres. The website is brewra.live, and that I just do it for my personal reasons and just
Excellent.
keeping in touch with friends and so on. So these help me to de-stress, get new people in the connect in the community to interact with. Yeah, that's what keeps my weekends going.
What do you think is the biggest difference between you in your 20s and you now?
I think I have learned to not only say no much better. I couldn't say no earlier. I would say yes to everything. So that was
Hmm.
one thing. But it's it's the ability to actually distill what's reality and what is not reality. It's the ability to determine what is real thing that matter to me versus what does not really matter to me. Money is not the only thing that matters. There
Hmm.
are things that matter beyond money. That ability of making that judgment that let's do this not just for the money, but let's do this for a cause. Those
Hmm.
things matter a lot more to me
Hmm.
at where I am versus when I was 20.
Love it. So what I'll do now is go ahead and share a very concise perspective regarding health and fitness, and then we'll go ahead and conclude the podcast with Sunny's plans for this year, whether that be professionally or personally. The main perspective I want to share today regarding health and fitness is really about how to make it time efficient. Sunny, as you know, a lot of
Mhm.
my audience are entrepreneurs and executives, so I want to make this perspective as doable and as applicable to these individuals. The biggest problem that we see, or that I see when it comes to health and fitness approaches, is a lot of them are location dependent. What do I mean by that? It's going to a gym, going to a location like a studio, and using that as your main way to make a physical transformation. The issue with this perspective is that it's something you have to make time for, and that is not really adaptable to your schedule. The issue is not all individuals have the same capacity to be able to go to a gym, to be able to go to a studio and tend to that as a main way to make a transformation. So what is required here is to, instead of making a location dependent approach, focus on a location independent approach. Something you can do anytime and anywhere as opposed to one fixed location. Something like step count or leveraging something like step count as your main way to make a transformation is extremely effective because you can do that while you're listening to this podcast. You can do this while you're traveling, and anywhere there's
Mm.
ground underneath you, you can use this as your main strategy to make the physical transformation. If you do that, you effectively now have an approach that adapts to your schedule as opposed to you making time for it, which will require you to go to a gym or which requires you to go to a studio. Now you instead have something that adapts to where you are and where you go, and that is far more doable than a location dependent approach. So hopefully that provided a different perspective, and this is actually what I personally use to lose over 70 pounds and keep it off myself. So hopefully that provided a different perspective today, and one that is far more easier to attend to compared to what's traditionally being told. So hopefully that was valuable. What we'll do now is go ahead and conclude the fitness conversation and move on to Sunny's plans for this year, whether that be professionally or personally.
Okay. Well, thank you for that health fitness brief. Um,
Mhm.
from a professional standpoint, there is a very interesting solution that we've been working internally and using it for our own company in our own services stack. It's actually a sales. You can call it a sales intelligence and a research AI research tool. Uh, and what it does is that if I plow in your company's name and just write which market you belong to and which market you're going to and what is your ICP, just select a bunch of profiles and it starts giving me indication signals, and it gives me signals on the market, it gives me signals on customer segments, gives me signals on ICP, gives me signals on real leads, lead stream, all of that stuff. So if I connect even more, if I just connect my CRM or my LinkedIn or my Play account or my Apollo account or whatever, it starts giving me even more enriched data. It starts giving me data about today morning, these four people in LinkedIn are screaming about a requirement. And that seems to be something that you guys provide. Go grab them,
Hmm.
something like that,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing, there's something else. Like for example, you can log in and say, "Hey, I'm looking at, for example, Seoul or Korea, or for that matter, I'm looking at Singapore as a market, or I'm looking at LATAM as a market, or whatever market that I'm looking at. Is it going to be profitable? Can I get a good GTM plan quickly developed up and running for me for 90 days? Not a 6 months plan, but a 90 days plan. Not a 1 year plan, but a 90 days plan." And
Hmm.
and uh, and it immediately spontaneously shows up with a 90 days GTM plan for me to take away from that tool. Similarly, uh, you can actually find out that Aryan is a good target as a student
Hmm.
in San Diego. And I don't know how to approach Aryan today morning. What should be my message to Aryan? So the
Hmm.
tool actually gives you the ability to say, "Hey, Aryan, you did a podcast with Sunny. It seems like you had these comments. Um, and you know what? We do something similar that resonates with your thought process, blah, blah, blah." So it gives you a message
Right.
through which you can connect with the audience, not
Love
just
it.
vanilla value prop and all that stuff. So that's what BREWRA AI does. It's been a solution that we've been using internally for
Hmm.
our own sales initiatives. And now we are actually piloting it with a bunch of, we're doing market validation and customer validation both. We started the POC process with a bunch of companies. And the idea is that if the POCs turn out to be good, if there is value for other customers as well, we will, sort of take it as a product and launch it in the North American and the Indian market for both these markets actually. So that's where professionally I'm very very engrossed and very
Yeah.
sort of looking forward for the rest of the year.
Certainly. So where can people learn more about you? Is LinkedIn a good place to learn more about you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I don't use not much of a social media person. I'm not on Insta or I am on Insta and Facebook, but I rarely log in actually. Didn't get don't get the time so much.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me. This is a pleasure to have you on, Sunny. This is Aryan Mohindra and